DJI introduced 4 new payloads for the M300. They introduced the H20 series, which comes in an H20, an H20T, an L1, and a P1. They do also have compatibility with only a few M200 sensors, which include the X-T2 and the Z30. So unfortunately, your X5S and your X7 are no longer compatible, which were obviously an elite camera for those in the photography space. Who knows what DJI's got in their bags to come, but these are enterprise grade payloads and they're really answering certain industrial applications for those that are in particular spaces that now the M200 may have not been able to do quite what these typical payloads and sensors are able to do. So in front of us here, we have the H20T. The H20T, the T stands for thermal. So you can get the H20, which has all the optical sensors, but it does not have the thermal sensor. Of course, there's a difference in price because you do have a thermal sensor. So this is the H20T here, okay? So what we have on the front, let's take this case off. We have a 20 megapixel camera. It's a 1-inch CMOS sensor. So that's gonna be your high resolution optical sensor. You get 32x digital zoom. We also have a 12 megapixel wide angle camera. The reason why that is because with the M300, you can have 2 operators. You can have a drone operator and a payload operator. So the drone operator is gonna be able to use the FPV camera on the drone for navigation, but the payload operator is gonna be able to use this for a wider field of view. Because if they're zooming up closely to a particular asset, then they're gonna be able to use this to better spatial awareness. Then here we have a rangefinder. The rangefinder is good to 1,200 meters. So it's a laser rangefinder. It can actually tell you how far a particular object is away from the aircraft. And then here you have the thermal sensor. So this thermal sensor is a 640 by 512 pixel thermal sensor, radiometric thermal sensor. I mean, it's top of the line, and in terms of the resolution you're getting from that, especially at altitude, it's ideal to have a higher resolution thermal sensor, which I think makes a lot of sense for those in this enterprise space to just choose a 640 over a 320. But of course, I think that the key features of this is how it operates with the M300. So this particular camera here, it has a couple features with the M300 that kind of distinguish itself from the other payloads. So you have smart pin and track. Smart pin and track, what it allows you to do is on your ground control interface, you're able to isolate an object. So let's say the aircraft is flying above a waterway, a river, and there's a particular fishing vessel that's out, maybe 800 meters away. You can point on that vessel and it will then, of course, because of the rangefinder, tell you how far away that boat is from the aircraft. So it'll say it's exactly 812 meters away. Then what you can do is you can actually click and select a box area around that fishing vessel and you can start track mode. So the aircraft will actually ensure that it follows that particular fishing vessel at the distance, the registered distance of 812 meters. So it's a really cool feature and is ideal for people that are in the public safety sector, whether you're a police officer or a firefighter. This is gonna be your go-to sensor right here. This has got everything you can actually wish for in a sensor where thermal is gonna be integrated to an optical sensor. So it's a really interesting feature. Now you could go to an H20, which is more catered to inspection industries. So something like a hydro line or a cell tower. It has the Smart Check AI. So what you actually can do with Smart Check AI is start to automate your inspection process, which is actually really fascinating. So if you're ever doing say a cell tower, you can tell it to look for a specific RRU rack. And every time you're looking at the cables on that RRU rack, whether your gimbal's pointed, 10, 20 degrees upwards, looking at the cabling underneath the RRU rack or the antennas, when you frame that up, you can tell it to remember that exact layout. So the distance the drone is away from that asset, the distance, the angle that the camera's pointed, and then the way it's framed up. So the zoom level of that 20 megapixel camera and how close it is to that particular asset. And it'll try to frame that up every single time it flies around an asset. So you start to automate processes. Of course, there's a little bit of lag room into ensuring that it's accurate, and there's a little bit of work on the operators to then refine their industrial application for that purpose. However, it's there, it's available. This drone is now smart enough to start doing work on its own, which is opening a whole nother category of how we're using drones. I mean, we're all excited about BVLOS and allowing drones to automate workflows at a larger scale. However, this is more about how smart can we make the drone? And that's gonna allow people who are in the inspection, in the vertical asset inspection industry, start to really utilize the drone as its own robotic tool and thinking for itself, which is kind of incredible, thinking knowing that you're gonna be able to then put the drone up in the air and it's gonna be able to do an entire, hydro line survey or cell tower survey on its own. I mean, to me, that's mind-boggling. A lot of us hadn't even thought of that, but the fact that DJI has now worked that out and is allowing people to start building those tools into their aircraft, into their workflow, is kind of groundbreaking in itself. So that's the H20T. Of course, the DJI does have two other sensors. It has the L1 and the P1. Now the Zenmuse L1 is a Lidar sensor. It uses the Livox Lidar. It shoots 450,000 points per second. That particular Lidar sensor in itself is gonna be great for surveyors who are trying to get pinpoint accuracy along a vertical structure. I mean, the point cloud density and what DJI has done and built it into their controller, being able to have a live feed of the point cloud as it's being built while the drone is flying is remarkable. But also what you're able to do that point cloud data afterwards into DJI Terra. They've created a seamless workflow that allows the operator to then collect Lidar data, which is colorized point cloud, and then put that into DJI Terra and have an entire surveyed area that's acres on acres that's been surveyed using the DJI M300 because of the extended flight time. Now, if the L1 is not quite what you're looking for, you do have the P1. The P1 is a full frame format sensor. It's 45 megapixels. You're gonna get incredible ground sampling distance, even flying at a high altitude of 90 meters. So if you're looking at something that's better than maybe what you have with the M200, which may be using an X5S or an X7, then I would say the P1 is gonna be your next best sensor that's gonna give you even better, crisper images to build out a better 3D model, a photogrammish 3D model, beyond maybe what those are capable, of course, because of the amount of pixels in the sensor. So those are the two sensors that then the four sensors that DJI has come out with are all new to the M300 and are only compatible with the M300. But of course, you do have backwards compatibility with the Z30 and the XT2, and you obviously have third-party options as well. So you also have the MikaSense dual MX sensors, which is both the red and the blue sensor. You do have multispectral options as well that are completely compatible with the M300 as it is, but you can use third-party sensors as well, and they have an SDK where you can start to integrate these sensors to ensure the Skyport is able to communicate with that camera and trigger it. So that can become more of an integration, which of course you could reach out to us and we can support that. But of course it requires a little bit more know-how of the drone and its software packages. So that's mainly the payloads of what the DJI M300 has. Of course, all this gear has to remain charged. So if you're gonna stay in the air, you have to keep the drone flying at all times. What DJI has come out with the M300, which I think everyone wished that we had with the M200, was a battery charging case, because there was one for the M600, but there was never one for the M200. And so what's great is the M300 now comes out with a battery station, and it allows for 8 batteries to be charged.